Welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this June 17th, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Catch my show every evening, like I tell you every day. And please tell your friends to catch my show, listen to these topics, and email me at gregbeacon@gmail.com. Go to my website at Arctic, that's ARCTICBEACON.com, and you can catch all my old shows, and dating back to way back to 2004, 2005. And hopefully we've progressed over the years. One of the things that I remember discussing a long time ago with a number of different people was the Vatican connection to Islam and ISIS, things like that. There is some solid evidence that the Vatican was involved in the creation of this religion, as it has created a number of other ones that we've discussed on this show. If you go back to my shows, we discussed this with a gentleman, not this subject, but how the Vatican perhaps was involved in the creation of the Mormon religion. And I had a gentleman on named A. True Ott, who tells a very intriguing story about that. Go back to my old shows. So we have, I don't think anybody that really follows this show or understands what we're talking about would argue with the fact that the Vatican and Catholicism is a counterfeit of Christianity. And the reason I got into this subject is because I was born a Catholic, and I was a journalist in Rome, and I saw this, the Vatican working both secularly and spiritually, right there in Rome. I was right there to see so much that I didn't understand when I lived in America. And what I learned also is how we are sanitized here with what we get from our news media regarding this subject. And it is an intentional cover-up. And I found it even back in the 80s with the Associated Press, the United Press International. I don't even think that company is involved anymore. The American newspaper in Rome being owned by the CIA, funded by them, as well as I'm sure the paper in France is as well. And what I found was that we have given a sanitized version of what the Vatican is really all about. So what I wanted to do today was to discuss the Vatican connection to Islam. And is it really something that we should consider? Now, you're going to go to, I recommend these days to get an overview of things, go right to Google and just Google the Vatican connection to Islam. And you're going to find many people have discussed this in depth. I mean, I did numerous shows on this subject with Eric Phelps, author of the Vatican Assassins, and a number of other people who opened up my eyes to the fact that there is a strong connection. And the reason is because if you understand how they operate, how they can create enemies in order to create a conflict so that they can get a synthesis that suits their needs. And in the end, they control everything. That's why you see the Vatican now opening its arms up. They do a big kumbaya at the Vatican now, and all of the religions of the world come and kiss the Pope's ring. And might I add, it's the leaders of those religions that do that. And I think many of them are, they understand quite well what's going on. So basically, looking at this, I wanted to go back. I used to listen to Walter Veith a lot, way back 10 years ago. And he was a Catholic, converted to, he left the Catholic religion, and became a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Now, there are a number of things about that church that are interesting, and I can say that you have to take Walter Veith's information and then do some research on the Church of Latter-day Saints, as well as, their prescribed leader, Helen White. And the way I got to know these people is I decided to not only listen to what I could see on the internet and talk to people and get people on my show that were involved with this group who outwardly criticized the Vatican, but yet that hold Ellen White up to this almost like godlike position. And so I started wondering, how did these people get started? And there's an interesting story back there, but what I decided to do years ago was to, almost every Sunday for a number of Sundays, I'd sit with a number of Latter-day Saints in their meetings. Well, I'd attend a little bit of their service, and then they have prayer meetings afterwards. So I figured I'd get to know them that way. And I found this real, you criticize Ellen White, and it was like criticizing God. So take it for what it is. I don't know all the intrigue behind the Church of Latter-day Saints and whether they, in fact, were created by the Vatican. But Walter Veith does bring out good information about this Islamic connection. So let's take it from that point of view and see what we can find. And I pulled up one of his old speeches that he did called The Islamic Connection, the Shrine, ISIS, etc., done number of years ago, but plays out well today. So I thought what we do is play some of that. I've got a spotty connection today, so if we go in and out, I will fill the void and keep an eye on this so we can get through this show today. One other thing. For all you people out there who may disagree with me on a number of subjects, that's good. I mean, nothing worse than everybody agreeing on everything. How can you learn? Now, I'm not the most patient person in the world. That's why I do a radio show. I'm constantly questioning. I don't have all the answers. If you want all the answers, there's people out there who profess to know them. Go listen to them. Maybe that makes you feel better. And if you're one of those persons that thinks they know all the answers, then think again. Because, I've learned over the years that I know very little. But I do know a couple things. And that is, I'm one of these kind of people that doesn't hold anything back. I'm not one of these passive-aggressive types. You may talk to me, I may look at you and roll my eyes, or I may interrupt you, I may do a number of different things. But one thing I'll always do is think about what you said afterwards and try and get to the bottom of what you believe too. Now, I know that might not be politically correct, but it's a habit I got into when I lived in Italy. One of the things I really hate about living in America is everybody's so closed-mouthed, and they always say, yes, they agree, and then they come back at you later with these kind of things that just drive me crazy. And I've done it in political discussions. I've done this in religious discussions. You just say what you mean. If you don't agree with me, tell me right up front, and we'll get it out, and then the next day we can be friends. One of the things I really found in this country is we all are afraid to look each other in the eye and say who we really are. And I'll tell you right now, I'm just a journalist trying to get to the truth. And if I step on your toes sometimes, that's just the way it's got to be. But, at least you can look yourself in the eye, and I'm not worried about anything. And the only thing I remember, though, by all my years in Italy is that Italians seem to understand that a little better, and you maybe argue with them that day and get into all kinds of little discussions that everybody was yelling. But the next day, it was all forgotten. And we went on because, there's a difference between your belief system and who you are. And what I mean by that is Don't let your belief system interrupt your coffee in the morning, or interrupt maybe getting to know somebody on a different level. What's the most important thing? You figure that out for yourself. But anyway, that's just one little aside. So let's get into this with Walter Veith. Hopefully this internet connection will hold today. I see it giving me limited capabilities. I don't know what the heck that means, but it's working okay now. So I'll put Walter Veith on and see if you think there's any validity to the fact that maybe the Vatican created Islam for a reason, and that is to create this big, huge conflict we're in today, where they sit up on top at the end by creating some whole new religion. Did you ever want to create your own? I remember a couple of years ago I ran a contest on, I wanted to see the most entertaining new religions out there. Create your own religion. Let me see it. We'll run a contest, and the winner gets a free ride to heaven. But what I'm getting at is sometimes imaginations run wild in these religions. And let's let Walter Veith tell us a little bit about what he thinks about the Vatican connection to Islam. Yes, the Vatican connection to Islam.
The Islamic connection is the name of this lecture, and it's quite a story. The Islamic religion is huge today, and it has some very fascinating features. It's a very exclusive religion. Nobody from the outside is allowed in. If there are pilgrimages to Mecca, only those of the Islamic faith are allowed to go to these pilgrimages. It is an exclusive religion. Evangelism in Islamic countries is totally forbidden. This religion has full control of the entire territory which it controls. Now, who and what is Islam? Millions of people make the pilgrimages to Mecca, where they worship at the shrine of Muhammad. What a privilege it is for them to make the pilgrimage. There's another religion which also propagates pilgrimages, and that is Catholicism. So you have pilgrimages to Lourdes and the Marian sites and to Fatima. Pilgrimage is a symbol of the great pagan religions of the past as well. Now, who was Muhammad? Muhammad Mustafa was born in 570 AD and he died in 632 AD. He fled to Medina in 622 AD after Khadija's death. Now, who was Khadija? Muhammad married Khadija when he was 25 and she was 40 years old. Her cousin, Varakwa, was a Roman Catholic, and she came from a Roman Catholic convent. So we could say she was a Roman Catholic nun. She was super rich. She lived in a convent, and she had the whole of the economy, basically, in her hand. And she employed this young man, Muhammad, whom she then also married. Muhammad marched on Mecca in 630 AD, 2 years before he died, and 4 years before Omar became Caliph. And the Quran was compiled in 650 AD. And Muhammad, who couldn't write himself, had a scribe to write down what he saw and what he heard. And the Quran is different, apparently, from all other religious writings because it was a directly dictated book. So it is not just transcribed by a prophet, so they teach, but is the very word of God, and therefore it must always remain in its original Arabic language. That is what is taught in the Islamic religion. The symbol of Islam is the sickle moon and the star. The star within the sickle moon. Now, where does this symbol come from? And who is Allah? Well, let's go to some interesting quotes, also from encyclopedias of religion and etc. Allah, he was the moon god who married the sun goddess. Together they produced 3 goddesses who were called the daughters of Allah. These three goddesses were called Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. The Encyclopedia of Religion mentions that Allah is a pre-Islamic name corresponding to the Babylonian Bel. Fascinating. So this is an ancient pagan religion, and Bel, or Baal, is the deity. We read in Morals and Dogma, page 451, the Arabian word Aldebaran means the foremost or leading star, and it could only have been so named when it did precede or lead all others. The year then opened with the sun in Taurus and the multitude of ancient sculptures both in Assyria and Egypt, wherein the bull appears with lunette or crescent horns, and the disk of the sun between them, are direct allusions to important festivals of the first new moon of the year, and there was everywhere an annual celebration of the festival of the first new moon when the year opened with Sol, the sun, and Luna, the moon, in Taurus. And the symbol of Taurus is that one over there. The crescent and disk combined always represent the conjunctive sun and moon. That means basically the male-female deity. Adoration of the celestial cow, Mehet Veret, there's the all-seeing eye, the eye of Osiris. Here are the horns, there is the disk in the horns, and it also represented the plunging of the sun god into the womb of the mother to be born by Isis. So the horns are also a representation of the moon, the sickle moon. So in later religions, or from Babylon itself, Assyrian style, there you have the half moon with a solar disk in it. And the same over here, enlarged. Note that this is Baal Hadad, the birth of the sun. If we go to Mesopotamia, we'll find the old symbol of Baal and Bel was exactly the same, the half moon and the star in it, representing the birth of the sun. Isis and Osiris, the male-female aspect.
Okay, I've got to cut in here because now, remember that this lecture was given almost 10 years ago. Now, that was no one 10 years ago understood anything about this terror group they call ISIS. And if we have any abilities to put two and two together, after you've researched a lot of the stuff we've talked about this show for 10 years, we will see that the ISIS worship is venerated where? The worship of Osiris, that whole story is venerated where? In the obelisks, the one that you go to in Washington, D.C., and it is called the representation of freedom. It is nothing more than a phallic symbol worshiping what Mr. Veith's talking about. The same thing exists in St. Peter's Square. I've walked through past that thing so many times. And I'll be honest with you. When I first did, when I was a young journalist, I had no idea what it was. I figured it was some kind of, gift or something, big deal. But little did I know what it really was. And you'll find one of those, that representation all over in London. And somebody else did a research video on this and found that they're all over the world, and in every city, major city, Moscow, Copenhagen, you name it, it's there. And that to me tells you who created ISIS. Now, you can do all the factual stuff. You want to go and trace the money. Don't you realize that trying to trace the money in the Vatican is like trying to put your hands around a cloud and then bottle it and bring it back to your house? They have so many different outlets, so many phony corporations set up, so many obstacles that if you find out something, they're going to say something else. And to me, that represents not Christianity, what is supposedly an open book, but why are they hiding everything? Why do they hide their books down in the Vatican archives? Why did they hide everything? And then why did they double talk you? So basically, ask John Levy, the attorney, and I've had John on my show many times and really studied the Alperin v. Vatican Bank federal lawsuit that was recently dropped by the black robe Ninth Circuit judges who said the Vatican Bank doesn't do business here. Well, when you see the Vatican Bank up close, like I did during the Vatican Bank scandal, you'll see that it is the biggest money laundering operation in the world because it has no controls. So crime, criminals, thievery, theft, everything is fair game to the Vatican. So why do people think that this guy that's coming here in September is, the Vicar of Christ? Because they've been brainwashed. Don't believe it. Look it up yourself. Start doing it. Catholics, I tell you, do some research on your own because you're never going to believe anybody else until you start seeing it. Somebody asked me once about Christianity. And I prescribed to, someone once said, it's not that Christianity is tainted all over. It's that it's never been practiced, really. Only a few have. And that's the real problem. So let's look at, we got a couple, I'll put on Walter Veith in the next half hour because we only got a couple of minutes. But isn't it interesting if we go back now 10 years ago? See what he was saying about ISIS, this creation of Islam, what they really are, and what's happening today. They got big plans for us. Oh, like I said, they're creating more, the Vatican's created more religions than any organization in the world, I believe. And they're starting a new one. It's going to be this one world religion. Oh, and they got everybody waiting for this one, don't they? And they're going to do it in a counterfeit fashion. I can't tell you exactly how. But they will win that prize. Oh, yeah, because everybody's going to believe it. Now, what did I say in the beginning of this show? I said, get it off your chest. If you believe, look, if you believe half of what comes out of the Vatican, you believe all of it. If you believe half of what comes out of NASA, you believe all of it. Don't give me this, I believe this, I believe that. It's either all or nothing. Now, you may disagree with me on that, but I'm going to hold my ground. And I'm going to say this, that if you believe certain things in the Vatican are good and true, and there's good people, well, look, there's people in there that don't know what's going on. I'll admit that. But that whole hierarchy organization is tainted and evil, and anything that comes out of them is. And that's the way I feel about NASA, because they're a part of them. The hierarchy is tainted, and everything they've done, I believe they're doing for a hidden reason, is untrue. Well, I love these people who tell me, oh, yeah, I don't believe that blah, blah, blah. I don't believe this, but I believe we went to the moon. Or I believe this, and I believe there's satellites, but we didn't go to the moon. Let me tell you this, none of it exists. It's all fake. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal on this June 17th, 2015 day on our calendar. It's a Wednesday. I just want to set that straight because I can't remember if I opened the show saying it was the 16th. You know, sometimes I just get confused, as we all do. But confusion is the beginning step of getting out of this matrix that we seem to have allowed ourselves to get in. I was walking the dogs today. I get up very early. I always did. Most people said, well, you get up early because you're getting old. I said, no, I used to get up early when I was, 7 years old, and I had to milk the cows at 4:30 in the morning before I went to school. And so I got into a habit of getting up early. And I was walking the dogs today, and I just had this thought. Man, wouldn't it be great if none of this stuff, all this information we have, wouldn't it be great if, there were no cars right now, nothing, and I could just get on my horse, ride into town, and carry my 6 guns with me and get into a barroom brawl? Well, there are good and bad things about the Old West, okay? But anyway, what I was getting at, I didn't look that far down the road. I just said, wouldn't it be nice if I could just do the things that we used to do? Grow your own food, have your own little dairy farm. They don't see that anymore. When's the last time you've seen there's probably a few of them around. But I think we'd be a lot better off if most of us would just mind our own business, including all of this huge government, all this thing we created, all this military action going on. It's just ridiculous. All the money they waste. Well, we see people, when I would kick my boat. I had a fishing boat and may go back to fishing again. I'm thinking about it. I like the solitude on the ocean. But I used to have it right downtown at the fisherman's docks, and sometimes I'd spend some time on the boat, and I'd wake up in the morning, and, man, this homeless population just grew and grew and grew, and I'm going, this is so stupid. None of this has to exist. And then I would look out, over my left shoulder, and there I see the Navy SEALs training on one of the empty fishing boats. I don't know what they were doing, setting off fake explosions and then running down the docks with their military weapons. And I remember I was walking my dogs up the docks, and all these kids in their uniforms were taking a break. And they had all their guns out. I walked up to one of them, looked at, hey, you have a license for that? And he didn't know how to take it, but I had my dogs with me, so it kind of diffused the issue. And he said, oh, what a beautiful Malamute. I said, yeah. So anyway, there we go. America up close and personal. Let's get back to Walter Veith. And we left off talking about Islam and ISIS and all those things 10 years ago. See how much sense it makes today to you.
So this would be Ashtoret and Tammuz, or Isis and Horus, the male, female. The same you find in Egyptian, as we have already discussed it. This is Baal worship, this is Lucifer worship in his male, female form. Now, the papacy has exactly the same thing, because the Pope is today the representative of the Babylonian religion. So when he says the Mass, he has a round wafer disc, its roundness coming as a symbol of Baal. And after a Mass, it is placed in a monstrance, which is a half moon. So then you have the birth of the sun, and you have it symbolized in this form. Here's another monstrance in which the host is placed, representing the birth of the sun. So Catholicism uses the symbol of the half moon with the sun or the star in it. Here's a Roman Catholic church in Germany, and it has this interesting clock on it, which I photographed. There's the moon, and there is the star. And this particular star here has 8 points. And as this clock moves round, of course, every time the long arm and the short arm intercalate, you have the birth of the sun god. Baal Hadad, Baal Hadad, Baal Hadad, every now and then, every hour of the day. Very interesting. So the symbol of Catholicism is the moon and the star, hidden, of course, in many other symbols as well. Now, this ancient religion existed before Islam, and the initiates of this religion, as we saw in Morals and Dogma, were the insiders, like Origen, for example, and the Bishop of Alexandria. These were the initiates who harbored the ancient religion, and they were Christian, so-called, but of course they were not Christian. They just propagated that for the Goyim, Catholicism. True Christianity, they fought tooth and nail and tried to eradicate, and they tried to eradicate the Word of God, as we saw, by changing it. Now, Islam arrives on the scene way after that. So the true harborers were in Christianity before they were in Islam, and they were in 2 places, Alexandria and Rome. Alexandria was eventually taken over by Christianity, and the bastion, the great library, was destroyed, and the final seat of the occult knowledge was in Rome. So Rome is the seat of the ancient occult knowledge before Islam even appeared on the scene. That is the fact. And this ancient occultism had a potent enemy. Who was that enemy? Christianity. Christianity was growing in the place where the disciples had taught it. Christianity was growing in the heartland of the Middle East, Asia Minor, all the way up to India, the Bible says, into the north of Africa. That is where true Christian doctrine prevailed. They kept the Sabbath. Only Alexandria and Rome did not keep the Sabbath. Alexandria soon disappeared as a seat, and then the Sabbath was not kept in Rome. Very interesting history. So the symbol that Catholicism uses is the star and the sickle moon, and this star, by the way, is exactly the same star as is used in Islam. Isn't that interesting? I wonder who gave rise to whom. Obviously, the one who is first can only give rise to the one who comes second, and not the one second give rise to the one who comes first. Isn't that correct? If we think about it. So in Catholicism we find the half moon or the sickle moon where the deity is in them. We find Mary replacing Jesus Christ as the mediatrix of all graces. The mediator, the sole mediator and advocate is replaced by Mary. So here in this Roman Catholic monastery, Christ puts the crown of thorns onto Mary and she has the holes in her hands. Mary is always depicted as coming out of a cave. Now the ancient deities always came out of a cave. Loyola, the Jesuit, received all his information in a cave, and it is interesting that Muhammad received all of his information in a cave. That's paganism. That has nothing to do with Christianity. Now here we see in Islamic countries, in this particular one over here, we have this strange structure over here, and we have a statue of Mary on top of it. And Mary there appeared, apparently, as this little gazelle. But before the king shot it, it changed into Mary, and she told him to build a monastery. And that she did, or that he did, and there is the monastery high up on a hill. Now, whenever I find a monastery high up on a hill, I'm very interested, because high hills were pagan high places, where they sacrificed to pagan deities. It is interesting that all the cathedrals in the world are built on pagan places of worship. Even the Vatican is built on a pagan site of worship. Nothing has changed. So when I came to this particular place in the Middle East, I went to look for the ancient place of worship, and sure enough, on the hill, there it is, the triple arches of the ancient deity of sacrifice in the cave, as per usual. It's interesting that Mary always appears in the cave. In Fatima, she's in the cave. In Lourdes, she's in the cave. The Pope is always visiting the cave and worshipping in the cave. As Osiris represented the sun in Egyptian law, Isis represented the moon, but the truth is that Osiris represented the male active generative powers of nature, while Isis represented the female passive or prolific powers. That's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. So it's actually a form of nature worship. These people would do well in the Bohemian Grove, worshipping the trees. The Templar revelation identifies Isis as the Black Madonna on no less authority than a former head of the Priory of Zion. The Black Madonna cult is century to the Priory of Zion. To them, at least, there is no doubt about the significance of the Black Madonna. You see, Osiris was both black and he was white. And he's worshipped as black and he is worshipped as white. Mary is worshipped as a black Madonna and as a white Madonna. So we have all these interesting nuances. The Hittites used the symbol of the half moon and the solar deity. This symbol today, of course, is used by none other than the United Nations. Well, let us travel to an Islamic country today. Here is a Catholic cathedral in Amman. And I'm photographing this Catholic cathedral standing at the mosque. So I'm standing on the ground of the mosque and I'm photographing the Catholic cathedral right opposite. Now, it's interesting how Catholicism and Islam stand side by side in all the Islamic countries. And every time, I'm so surprised to see the cathedral and the mosque next to each other. You see, if you know the inside religion, behind the scenes, they're actually the same. So if I look at the symbolism on the outside of the Catholic cathedral, I have the symbol of the sun, because it was the symbol of the sun worship. And the cross, of course, the symbol also of the sun god. And there is the symbol of the sun. If I go across the street, and there is the great Abdullah Mosque, one of the finest, built by King Abdullah. On the gates, you have the symbols of the sun. Same symbolism, same religion. On top, of course, now, here you have the moon, the sickle moon, which the Catholic Church had on the clock. It was a symbol of Baal, or Baal. Inside this mosque, there are, of course, no pews, because in Islam, you bow down and kneel on the floor, on the carpet. And if you look up at the tremendous dome, you have, again, the great solar blazes in this wonderful building. Islamic dress, well, you can look at old-fashioned Catholic nuns, and you will find that the dress is identical. Catholic nuns wear the same dress as Islamic women of Orthodox faith. This is the great mosque in Damascus. Fascinatingly, inside the mosque, right inside, is this shrine, and there is a Muslim man praying at this shrine. Now, who's he praying to? Is it to Allah there? No. He's worshipping a relic of the dead, because this is the shrine of none other than John the Baptist. Now, if you know something about Johannsites, we've spoken about that, then you can already pick up, if you pick up the name John, you have Johannsianism, then you have secret societies blended in the background. And they claim that this place has the head of John the Baptist. So an Islamic shrine in Damascus, this is, by the way, the oldest mosque, the most illustrious in that country, has this head. Fortunately, the Roman Catholic Church has a shrine with the arm of John the Baptist. I always say, if they carry on, they might be able to put him together again. I don't know. So it is the same form behind the scenes. Inside the mosque, the women are not that important. They are relegated to the side. The men get the central positions. They are praying there with beads. In Catholicism, you pray with beads. You pray with rosaries. Now, which other religion has the priesthood just for men? The Roman Catholic Church is exactly the same, and here you have the same position in the Islamic world. The Islamic all-seeing eye, this is a very prominent structure that is used in all of Islam, and you will not find a taxi cab anywhere in Islamic countries that will not have the all-seeing eye there as a protection. Of course, it's used in Catholicism as well, and it's on the US dollar and all these interesting places. There's, of course, the Eye of Hathor, the Eye of Osiris, on an Egyptian temple. There it is, on a Roman Catholic pulpit. Another one on a Roman Catholic cathedral. Masonic author Carl Claudy writes, this is one of the oldest and most widespread symbols denoting God. We find it in Egypt. In India, the open eye of Egypt represents Osiris. In India, Shiva is represented by an eye, and the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry says the all-seeing eye is an important symbol of the supreme being borrowed by Freemasonry from antiquity. On the same principle, the Egyptian represented Osiris. So, Islam uses the symbol, Catholicism uses the symbol. I'm just showing you some comparisons. To the ancient Egyptians, the right eye symbolized the sun, the left eye the moon. So there you have, again, the two aspects of the sun god. Bailey then goes on to mention, this is Alice A. Bailey, that the eye of God is Shiva or Siva, the destroyer. Remember, Shiva is the Indian god who is the equivalent of Osiris. Shiva is also a synonym for Satan. Is it possible that both religions in the inner circle worship the same Lucifer, but that the outer court knows nothing about this? Well, who was Baal? Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Whenever the Israelites made one of their almost periodical deflections to idolatry, Baal seems to have been their favorite idol. In Tyre, Baal was the sun, Ashtoreth the moon, and so we have all the evidence that they know exactly what they're doing. There is no contradiction here, for Set is the Egyptian devil and Shiva is the Indian god of destruction. Both names, Set and Shiva, are listed in the Satanic Bible as another name for Satan. And Elena Petrovna Blavatsky affirms, now we have to remember that Shiva, Palestinian Baal, or Moloch, and Saturn are identical. Is it possible that both religions serve the same master behind the scenes and that the masses are deceived, just like in Catholicism? Beautiful people who are kept ignorant. And the sincerity of the Muslim duped and misused because they are goyim, catechumens. Elena Petrovna Blavatsky links Set to Satan. Hermes, the god of wisdom, is called Tot Tat Set, Satan. All of these Ancient Egypt, Set was worshipped under obscene homosexual rituals. And they had temples in which they had these homosexual rituals. For example, the Luxor temple. I have them, but I won't show them. Now, this is an ancient pagan site. The Luxor temple, one of the great relics of past times. Now, here we're going into the entrance, and oops, what's that? That's a mosque. Now, where's that mosque built? You don't mean the mosque is built into the Luxor temple? Is that possible? Well, let's go a little bit closer. Yes, there it is. It's in the Luxor temple. What does that tell you? If you had to build a Christian church today, would you go and choose the ancient pagan temple of Baal and build your church right in it? Yes or no? No, of course not. But what if the secret religion is really the same old ancient religion of Lucifer worship? Would you then perhaps do it? Perhaps, yes. So there they've done it. It's built into that temple. Amazing. On the ruins. Now let me take you to the temple of Baal, which is in another country, in Lebanon. And there it is. And on the Baal site, which is the same deity, by the way, what is that? That is a Roman Catholic place, a Roman Catholic church. On the same site, there is the cross, there's the temple of Baal. Why build it on the same site? Why have the same rituals? Catholicism does it, Islam does it. Do you think they have an agenda? And if we go into the great Catholic places, this is the place where Mary apparently ascended. Here is the great cathedral in Jerusalem. On the floor you have the solar circle with all the signs of the zodiac, which, by the way, God forbids. God forbids. And this is the place where Mary lay, and then she ascended, of course, to heaven. She didn't stay dead there. On the floor you have the pagan symbols. You have all of these interesting mitzvotums and what have yous, and the pentagrams, upside down pentagrams, all symbols of Lucifer. And then in the paintings, this interesting star. This is actually two squares, one inside the other, and that is how the pagan deities were represented very often, either as triangles, one within the other, or as squares, one within the other. And the squares, one within the other, were often used for Isis and Osiris. There you see it in the Roman Catholic Church dedicated to Mary. Also on the floor of that Roman Catholic cathedral, you have the boat, you have the waves, the water, you have the P and the X. Remember that Morals and Dogma told us that that was the staff of Osiris. So that means it's actually a male phallic symbol, and the boat would be the womb. This is a very naughty picture in a nice setting. Nobody would know what that really means. Nobody would really guess that that is an obscene picture, unless you read what the Masons say about it. Now, isn't it interesting that the ship with its mast in the half moon was also the same depiction? So here is a Roman Catholic cathedral built like a Phoenician ship. Now, what has a Phoenician ship got to do with Roman Catholicism? Unless, of course, it is the womb. Now, let's ask Albert Pike to explain this to us. Albert Pike writes that Isis and Osiris, the active and passive principles of the universe, were commonly symbolized by the generative parts of man and woman. The Indian lignam was the union of both, as were the boat and mast, and the point within the circle, all of which express the same philosophical idea of the union of the two great causes of nature, blah, 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 blah. So, we're still on track here. We find this in the Roman Catholic Church. Inside this Knights Temple, we've been there before, but I want to show you something else. Remember last time I showed you the double-headed eagle? But I'm now going to point your attention to the floor. Oops, what is that? That's an 8-pointed star. Now, who does the star represent? Well, there's the Star of Islam. Isn't that interesting? The two are identical. There's the Star of Islam, in various forms. So we find the star in Islam, we find it in the Catholic cathedrals, we find it especially dedicated to Mary, and we find it in the Islamic world. Now, how does the star come into existence? It's simply a square within a square, and there you have it. If you want to have the Star of David, you just take the triangle within the triangle, and you have it. There you go. It's a sex symbol. It's occult. It's very occult, in fact. So now, here's an interesting story of a man who claims to have been a Jesuit. His name is Alberto Rivera. And he claimed that Cardinal Bea, the Jesuit general, personally instructed him on the origin of Islam. According to Rivera now, the Roman Catholic Church started Islam on purpose to take the Arabs under their control and to secure Jerusalem.
Okay. All right. We're going to leave it at that because we're running out of time and come back tomorrow. But wasn't that interesting? You know, we've discussed Alberto Rivera in many different occasions. And tomorrow we'll pick that up. Interesting thoughts. I'll leave you with this one. Did the Vatican create Islam? Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.